Today we're going to start preparing for some of the geometry lessons that you'll cover when you come back from winter break. So the notes for today are for Prep 1A, which is the first day of prep that we're going to be doing for geometry. These definitions are pre-written to help the notes today be a little bit shorter. Feel free to press the pause button if at any point it's taking you an extra second to get them written down so that you don't feel like you're racing ahead, okay? So in order to understand geometry, we have to start off by practicing a lot of new words. And so in today's notes, there's going to be 9 different words that we cover that mean specific things in geometry. So most of these are going to be talking about shapes in geometry. Geometry is all about making sure that you understand the small differences. So make sure when I point out little things here or there that you're careful about practicing what they mean that are different. So in geometry, a point is defined as being a location. We draw a point by drawing a little dot like this, like when you think about graphing something on a coordinate plane. But a point is a location without size or shape that's represented by a dot. In geometry, whenever you name a point, you name it just with a single capital letter. There's no like dot that goes next to it when you're using the notation to say that it's a point. So anytime you see a single capital letter, you know that that refers to a point. So point A is how I would say this out loud. A line is defined as being a set of points that extends forever in both directions without end. So in this picture right here, there's a point on the line named A, there's a point on the line named A, and a point on the line that's named B. And so to talk about this line, notice that I put the A and the B next to each other, and then I draw this symbol on top. It would be helpful for you to add on to your papers that you could name this line AB, or you could also name it line BA, because lines go forever in both directions, so it doesn't matter with lines which letter you put first. Sometimes it will matter, so just make sure that you know that lines are one of the ones where it doesn't matter. In geometry, a plane is your flat surface. A plane is like a tabletop. A plane is defined as being a two-dimensional surface that extends in all directions. So when we draw a plane, we can't draw something infinite. So what we usually do is we draw it like a slanted, kind of like if you were looking at a surface from an angle. So it looks like a parallelogram almost. And so this shows us the shape of our plane. And then anytime you name a plane, you can pick 3 letters that are on points that are on the plane, but it's important that the 3 points that you pick don't go in the same straight line. So since A, B, and C are not all in a straight line together, I can call this plane ABC. When I named the line, I could draw this symbol on top, so I didn't have to write the word line out in front of it. But when I name the plane, there's no symbol for plane. It's not like you just draw one of these. So when you ever name a plane, you're going to name it with the word plane out front. The prefix co, when you see it on a word, means either with or together. And so collinear means that the points are on the same line, and coplanar means that the points are on the same plane. So collinear points are 3 or more points that are on the same line, or they lie on the same line. So in this picture right here, A, B, and C are all on the same line. That means that they are collinear. Coplanar points are 3 or more points that are on the same plane. And so collinear means they're on the same line, and coplanar means they're on the same plane. And so that part of the word makes it easier to remember which one's which. Again, there's no symbol to say that something is collinear or coplanar, so you just have to write out the word. And so having definitions for these words will help you. We're going to practice them in a couple of examples where they're just asking us to look at the picture and answer the question. But getting a foundation for these will help you with what we learn when we come back from winter break. Question number 1 says, name the following using the picture at the right. So I'm going to use this picture over here. The first thing they want me to do is name all of the points. So points have to have the dot next to them. So looking at the picture, I see that there are 4. Point A, point B, point C, and point F. W is in the corner of the plane and it doesn't have a point next to it, so that one's not a point. That's actually one of the different ways that you can name a plane. So I'm going to say A, B, C, and F are the 4 points that I can see on that picture. The second question says, give 2 names for the line. So I can name this line using any 2 points that are on the line. So I know B is on the line, I know C is on the line, and I know F is on the line. So you can name any combination of those letters. I could say that the line is line CF because those are 2 points that are on the line. And I could also say that the line is line FB because those are 2 points that are on the line. It doesn't have to be 2 points that are right next to each other, and it doesn't have to be the one on the left goes first and the one on the right goes second. It just has to be any 2 points that are on the line. I'm just writing down a little note here that there's more that you could come up with as well as the 2 that we listed. The last one says give 2 names for the plane. So when you name a plane, there's 2 ways you can do it. You can either pick any 3 points that are on the plane that are not in the same line. So one way I could name this plane is I could call it plane, and then I can pick any 3 points besides B, C, and F because they're on the same line. So I have to use A instead of one of these since these 3 are in the same line. So I'm going to call it plane F, C, A, and that's one way I could name it. A second way I could name it is if I wanted to, I could pick 3 other points that aren't in the same line and I could name it the same way. But I want to give you a different way of naming it here for your notes. The W that's right over here in the corner is naming the whole plane. It's not naming a point on the plane. And so anytime you see a letter in the corner of your plane, you can also just use that one letter and I could call it plane W. But please make sure that you understand here in this question that I could not call this plane A because A is a point on the plane. It's not like this W that's over here in the corner that's talking about the whole thing. In example number 2, we're just being asked a couple other questions about the definitions that we just practiced. Example 2A says name 3 points that are collinear. So if I look at the picture, there's 2 different answers that I could give for this question. I'm looking for 3 points that are on the same line because it says collinear. So points C, D, and E are on the same line, but that's not the only answer to the question. Notice how this line that comes here kind of looks like it's coming down and it's poking through the paper at point R, and then the dashed part down there means that it's underneath the picture. So you could also say, as a different answer for this question, that points G, R, and F are also collinear. They only wanted us to give 3, so we don't have to give both answers. G, R, and F. But for your notes, I'm just going to write down, that doesn't really look like an R. For your notes, I'm just going to write down that there's a second answer that you could give. A lot of times on these questions, there's more than one answer. The next one says give 2 names for the plane. So I can name the plane by any 3 points that are not in a straight line that are on the plane, or I can use the letter that's over here in the corner. So let's see, for this one, G is not on the plane and F is not on the plane. G is up above and F is down below, so I'm not going to use those. But I could say plane CRD. And then not just because I'm running out of space, but I'm going to use the X that's over here in the corner because X is not a point. It doesn't have a dot next to it, so I could use that to refer to the plane. Instead of using CRD, you could also say CER, or you could say DER, so you could pick any points that are on the plane. You just can't use F, and you can't use G because those are above and below the plane. Oh, well, that's question C. Name 1 point that is not coplanar. So there's 2 choices you could pick for letter C. Point G is up above, so you could say point G. And if they wanted you to give a second answer, you could also say point F, because point F is down here and it's underneath the rest of them. And then the last question on this one wants us to name 2 lines. So when I look at this picture, I see that I have 1 line here, and there's lots of different ways I can name that line. And then I have a second line here. So they want me to name this one using 2 of the points on the line, and then I'll use this one naming 2 of the points on the line. So you can use the first one and the last one. You could use the last one and the first one. You could use the middle one and the last one, or the last one and the middle one, any 2 points that are on this line. So I'm going to say line. Notice how I put the 2 arrows on either end of this symbol. So I'm going to call it line CE. And then my second one, I'm going to call it line GF. But if I flip-flopped these letters and wrote them in the other order, or if I used the R in this one, or if I used the D in this one, that would be fine. But make sure that you notice on your notes that anytime you name a line, even though there's 3 points on the line, you're going to use 2 letters. So you're only going to use 2 letters out of any of the number of letters of points that are on the line. It's only 2 when you're naming lines. All right. So that sort of practices the first part of the vocabulary. This box down here has 3 more definitions of things that we're going to be using. We'll be answering some of these questions about these on the back of the notes for today. A ray is a part or a portion of a line that starts at an endpoint and it goes infinitely in only one direction. So in this picture, a ray reminds me of an arrow because it starts here and it goes in this direction forever. The first letter that you put when you notate a ray has to be the end point. Let me try a little harder there. So what I'm writing is that the end point goes first. So even if my ray was facing the other direction and if it was pointing back this way, I would still put the end point of wherever it starts first. So unlike up here when we named a line and we said that these letters could go in either order, with a ray the order matters and the end point has to go first. A line segment is a part of a line that's bound, which just means it stops on both sides, by two endpoints and all of the points that are in between. So in this picture, I'm talking about just from A to B. So it's kind of like you chopped off this part of the line and you chopped off this part of the line and you're just left with a segment. When I name a line segment, I don't put any arrows up here because a line segment starts and it stops. It doesn't go infinitely past either of these sides. So this is line segment AB, and I know it's a segment because this doesn't have any markings up here. Notice how even though it has dots, you don't put the dots here and here, you just leave it without anything, and that's how you know that it's a line segment. Part of geometry is just making sure that you keep your eye on these little things. So lines cannot be congruent because they go forever in both directions. Rays cannot be congruent because they go forever in one direction, but a line segment can have a measurement. So you could say that this was 4 units long, or you could say that it was 10 units long. So because this can be measured, there could be such thing as two segments that are congruent. So a congruent segment is defined as being segments that have equal lengths. Technically, let's cross out the word 2 in our definition for this one, because a congruent segment, you could have 3 of them that were congruent. So it's just segments that have the same lengths. When I look at the picture, these little double dash markings here and here are the way in geometry that you show that two things are equal to each other, two side lengths. And so if I was going to make a statement about these two segments, I would say either line segment AB, or I could say BA because it's a segment, so it's the same thing, is congruent to line segment CD, or I could say DC, and it would mean the same thing. This symbol right here is an equal sign with a little wave on top. I kind of drew it rather large just so that you could see it well. But this segment, when you say it out loud, you say it is congruent to. So this says segment AB is congruent to segment CD.